The cross of Christ is all about grace. It's about what Christ has done, rather than I've done horrible stuff, I don't believe in you, God, and I'm just going to hell.
I mean, I wasn't running away from God. I actively had turned to God after going through a part of my life where I was wicked. And I turned away from that for probably 3 years. And I mean, I really, really searched. I went on a mission trip. I did all of that all the time, being unable to believe. And it was probably one of the most painful years of my life, because I was in the position where I was trying to give people something that I thought that I could never get, because I was searching so hard. And the more that I searched and the more that I tried to find evidence and tried to find God, I couldn't. And it was this feeling of believing in all of this, but not, I'm just a skeptic at heart. That's just a part of my personality. And so I was in a position where I knew that I was going to hell, but there was nothing I could do about it. And that is one of the most painful things to believe. And it was so rough. And so over time, I mean, the more that I looked, I really got into apologetics and searched, and over time I realized that this probably isn't true, especially for how hard I had been searching and for how long I had been searching. It just, why did God not do that for me if I was truly looking?
I've had periods, not a full year, of tremendous doubt. I've had times where I've had the Bible open and I've been out in my yard at 11 o'clock at night and felt like, oh, this is just a dusty old Aesop's Fables. What am I doing here? And that was during a period of depression for me. And so it was so painful. But at the same time, I relied more so on God's promises than my emotional struggle at that time. I don't know if you had emotional struggles during that time, but it's fascinating to hear you say, I kept searching and not finding, because I would say that's more so up to you. When I'm listening to you and you saying also, I believe that I'm going to hell, I think you have an inner struggle there where, how do you know you haven't met God? How do you know God hasn't met you? Because just that struggle alone, where you're deciding not to turn away from Him, and that this is not the end. Because I also hear you sound like there's all of a sudden been this closing time, where you've searched and it's over. But I think you have a lot more life to live, and I believe personally you're going to keep searching. I don't know that for sure, and that God will meet you in some kind of way. But don't forget, I don't think we need to set it up in such a way where it's, God, you have to meet me, I have to trust in you, I have to have this type of evidence in order to get to heaven. Versus, God, you have not given me this, and I believe and I know I'm just going to go to hell. See, I don't think you know for sure. I don't think anybody here can just condemn themselves and know for certain that they're going to hell, because that's too much so up to them. The cross of Christ is all about grace. It's about what Christ has done, rather than I've done horrible stuff, I don't believe in you, God, and I'm just going to hell.
Because I'm a skeptic at heart,
Yeah.
I literally couldn't get myself to believe in something like this. I desperately wanted to believe in it, and I would love to have that kind of belief, but it's just not in the cards for me because of the way that my brain works. And I've tried. I've been studying Christianity for 7 years now, or more even. I'm gonna be a religion studies minor. And I mean, it's fascinating to me, but I really do search this out consistently. And it just never, if God is real and God made me like this, it feels like I was born with a hardened heart.
Why are you searching? If you had a hardened heart, you would say, God, get away from me. I'm not even going to ask the question, and I'm done with seeking after any evidence. I would just say continue with what you're doing, because everything I hear in your language is it's over. Everything's done. I think it gets back to his question that he keeps asking people out here that I would love to hear from you. What is more reliable? What are you living for rather than God? Because I would like to know that, because potentially I would want that. and I'm not being, I'm not patronizing you in any kind of way right now. I'm being serious, because I have doubts. What can I live for? Is it just skepticism and agnosticism that I should live for all life long?
Well, I think that for each individual, there's something that you're drawn to that can give you purpose. It is harder to find that purpose without religion, and for some people, religion is super important, and it gets them through it. Religion does have a purpose.
But we're not religious. See, you're a religious major. We don't need some type of philosophy of religion to get through. We come to the Christian faith because it's true, not because it just works for us and makes us feel good. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, you believe that it's true.
I feel like it's opposite right now of what you're talking about with the evidence. Because I hope you rejected the Christian faith because you didn't see evidence for, say, the resurrection, or reliability of the Gospels, or that Jesus Christ really was God. Because what I just heard you say was, religion is good. It works. No, we're not for religion. We would never go to a college campus and really try and just fit you guys into some type of philosophy box or religious box and say, here's some spiritual supplements. Go out there and just get it. We're not life coaches. We're actually saying the evidence is credible for Christ, for the reliability of the Gospels, and I think you have a God-shaped hole. As a therapist, everybody, even atheists, now say, you have a God-shaped hole. What are you going to fill it with?
I think everybody fills that hole with something different, with different religions, I guess. I guess everybody thinks that they're right in the way that you think that you're right.
And you do too, right?
I mean, I don't
Skeptics
know.
think that they're right.
I don't think that I can know for certain. I don't think that I can be right.
But that's knowing for certain. Saying that I cannot know for certain ever is a claim to truth that this is exactly right.
I could potentially know, but it would take a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It would take a lot for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there just hasn't been that sort of connection.
What would you like? What would you like in order to believe in God and Christ?
I think I'd need a personal experience.
Uh-huh.
Those are the strongest. Those are what brings people into a religion, is personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I searched for that personal experience for so long, and I mean, I tried so hard, and I just haven't had that.
Because you're up in your head so much, seeking, I have to have this personal experience. God, you have to show me this way, and God, I have to do this. There's a lot. I don't think you're struggling with pride necessarily. I don't think that's prideful, but I do think it's tremendously self-focused, and you're not going to meet God when you're saying, I have to have an experience, I have to have this much evidence, I have to have X, Y, and Z. It's no, God, I am surrendering myself, I'm giving up. See, this is why AA is so powerful. If you're gonna get over addiction, alcoholism, you have to give up your life. You have to say, no, it's not about me, it's not just looking inward. God, I have to give up myself. So this is just my last point where it's try and get out of your head. And how do you get out of your head? Start saying, God, thank you. Maybe you're not there, but thank you for my life. I struggle at times. Thank you for my family's life. Thank you for the beauty of today. Thank you for your omniscience. You're all powerful for actually creating this place. And see what begins to happen, because that gets your head down into your heart rather than just skepticism, agnosticism, what's going on? I'll never be able to figure it out, because ultimately that's going to be worshiping the search. And I would hate for you to worship the search all life long. That's going to cause a lot of anxiety, a lot of frustration. And I think worshiping the search ultimately is a dead end, because there has to be real truth out there.
I guess, so I'm an atheist.
Yeah.
I don't believe God exists. I'd
Right.
also say I'm an agnostic atheist, so I don't believe because I don't think there's sufficient evidence. But let's for a second assume that there is a creator of the universe, and the creator is all-powerful and is all-knowledgeable, right? So can do anything that's not contradictory, for example, and knows what's going to happen, knows everything, right? How do you then go from that and show a skeptic how we can discern God's moral nature? How does all good follow from all knowing and all powerful?
It doesn't, you're right. Instead, I depend upon God to reveal God's character. I'm not smart enough to figure out God's character. I can't assume that God is good. You're absolutely right. That's where Jesus Christ comes into the picture. Jesus Christ claimed to be God, revealing his character. And he revealed that his character is loving, just, faithful, forgiving, gracious. You take Christ out of the picture, and I'm up a creek without a paddle when it comes to explaining why I think God loves you and me.
Okay, if we assume that God is all-powerful and all-knowing, it would then follow that God has infinite power to deceive us. That is, God could very well be capable, and I don't think there's a way of knowing this, of saying, okay, we're going to put Jesus on earth, we're going to, teach you all these things that are going to seem good to you. Remember, you have the mind I created and I programmed the way I want. But actually, I've done the calculus, and this actually isn't the best world. These are just things I like for my amusement. How do we know we're not being deceived if God has all these capabilities that we can't even grasp in the first place?
It all comes back to Christ. Is he a reliable source of information about God, or is he not? And I think the evidence of his life, teachings, death, and resurrection is he's a reliable source of information about the character of God.
Okay. Let's assume, for example, that Jesus existed, did all the things that you mentioned, said all the things you said, rose from the dead, right? Why does it then follow that we ought to follow Jesus' actions? I get that Jesus did these things, and you probably have some sort of intuition that at least some of them were very positive. But, I mean, you rightly criticize people going like, oh, I'm doing this because I feel good, is not a grounding for objective morality. So how do we go from Jesus said this message to we now ought to follow that message ourselves?
He's true. He's real. That's the best reason to follow Christ and to obey him, because the evidence is he's true and real.
My issue maybe this is where there's a bit of a disconnect. I feel like when you're saying that Jesus is true, you're making more of a descriptive claim in the sense like this is way the world was, Jesus existed, he did all those things, and for example, our records faithfully account that in the Bible and the Gospels, right? My issue, and this is like a philosophical thing that's been talked about for a while, is how do you go from a description of how something is or was to how something ought to be? That's my issue.
Does the historical evidence point to Jesus being real and reliable? I think it does. And then this Jesus says, God created us for a purpose, to love him and to love each other, and then he describes what this love is to look like.
When you say objective, maybe, what do you mean when you say objective morality versus subjective morality?
What I mean is, it is never good for you to abuse an innocent child. Never. Those are objective morals. It is never good for you to covet.
So what's wrong with saying something like this? I think for my moral system, right, and I think what happens is that we all have these very strong baseline intuitions on a very fundamental level. So, for example, it's better to, take a nap than stab yourself with a rusty knife. Pretty much 100% of the human population is going to agree with that statement. So what I'd say morality is, and the reason why we have these such strong primal intuitions, is because the instances of murder, rape, abuse, all this, violate these fundamental intuitions that we all share. The issue I have with that, though, is we can all arrive at kind of an agreement on certain positions, and it can function kind of like objective morality, but I don't know if there's any grounding to that initial intuition. And I also don't know if religion escapes that objection. That is, why do you have an intuition to trust God, for example? Or say Jesus says love is all important. How do you know that love is something we ought to value? You just say it's self-evident, but where is the grounding for that? Isn't that also just subjective?
We all have consciences, and it's phenomenal how much agreement there is between the human conscience in South America, in Asia, in North America, that the abuse of an innocent child is wrong. Are there exceptions? Yes, there are. Obviously, there are exceptions. But consistently, the abuse of an innocent child is wrong. Why? The human conscience seems to reel back and say that is wrong. Where does the human conscience come from? It doesn't come from matter and energy. It comes from a just God who gives us a conscience so that we can understand the difference between justice and injustice, right and wrong. As I look around the world, people innately have an ability to love. Where does love come from? It's far more plausible to believe that love comes from a personal God than it is to believe that love comes from matter and energy.
I feel like we're kind of back at the beginning, though, because you just said that it's a just God that has given consciousness, and this consciousness is able to tell us certain things about the world. But again, you're kind of presupposing that God is already just.
No, I'm asking the question, in light of the fact that we have a conscience, what is the most reasonable, the most plausible answer to the question Where does the human conscience come from?
I think that's a different question. Like, I don't have a fantastic answer to that. But even if we assume it's God that created consciousness, right? I don't think that solves the moral questions that we've been asking, right? Because how do we know our conscience is reliable? How do we know we ought to do what our conscience tells us? So people do what their conscience tells them, but how do we know that that's actually a good thing? What if it would actually be better if instead of going off our consciousness, we sit down and we go through a bunch of things and check it off and come to it that way? How do we know which method is better? And my issue is I don't think religion gets around that fundamental question.
Jesus Christ claims to be God, revealing moral truth, objective moral truth. Jesus says, you've heard that it was said, do not commit adultery. But I tell you that if a man lusts after a woman, he's committed adultery with her in his heart. Meaning by that, the heart of morality is the human heart. It's not just a rule, don't commit adultery. No, it's the human heart that says, okay, I'm going to view this woman as a human being, not as a hunk of meat on a hoof. So that is Jesus who defines that. And now the question is Jesus really the creator who gave us a conscience in the first place? And by exercising our consciences in a responsible way, can we understand what is good and what is evil?
Really appreciate your willingness to come here and engage in this dialogue. It's a lot, both informative and interesting. I guess the last kind of question here is how, for example, when we were given the 10 Commandments, right? How does God decide what those commandments are? Because the way I heard it phrased, right, is there's kind of two explanations. There is a sufficient reason that God can point to as to why these things are wrong, in which case that at the very least implies some sort of standard outside of God that an atheist could appeal to. Or B, it's just because God said so, which seems to be almost the definition of subjective, because being a creator does not automatically mean you are an arbiter of morality. They're not mutually exclusive, but one does not entail the other.
So the reason that we have the 10 Commandments is because God is communicating how to treat someone who has value. And of course, Jesus and the Bible insist he has innate value. Therefore, if I steal from him, if I lie to him, if I covet what he has, that is degrading him, that is sin. So the 10 Commandments are based on God is to be stood in awe of. Human beings have innate value because God created us for a purpose.
Yep.
And then God says, okay, now, because he has innate value, don't lie to him, don't murder him, don't seek to seduce his wife and commit adultery, don't covet what he has. Instead, celebrate him, love him, respect him. Don't use him.
So I guess, would you say then the external standard then or reason is the innate value of humans? So God is saying, because you are me, I value me, so you should value each other.
No, it's because I created him with innate value, and I created you, Cliff, with a free will. You better learn to respect the man, you better learn to love the man, and that's objectively true and real. It's not just a subjective feeling that you have, Cliff. It's objectively real. Purpose, that's what I created you for. You know, it's very similar to if I take off this wristwatch and use it to hammer and nail. What's wrong with that is it's a violation of the purpose of this wristwatch. This watch was not made to hammer nails. So this man and this man were not created to manipulate each other, to lie to each other, to abuse each other in any way. We were created for a purpose, and that is to love and respect each other as human beings created in the image of God.
I mean, I have some issues with that, but I don't want to take up any more time. Thank you.
Delight to talk with you. Thank
as
you.
well.